The rise and fall of HP sauce is a story that'll make your blood boil, because that iconic bottle with the Houses of Parliament on the label was as much part of our national identity as the Queen herself. But here's the thing that'll twist your bacon sarnie. The sauce that once symbolised British manufacturing pride isn't even made in the UK anymore. So who did we lose it to? Loyal fans swear it tastes different. So we'll show you why. What happened to HP sauce is a betrayal that mirrors the death of British industry itself. What exactly occurred? Let me explain. Walk through Aston in Birmingham any morning before 2006, and you'd know exactly where you were before you even opened your eyes. That sweet, tangy, spicy aroma of HP sauce being cooked filled the entire neighbourhood like an invisible blanket. It wasn't just a factory smell, it was the smell of home, of jobs, of pride. For over a century, the HP factory on Tower Road was more than just a building where they bottled brown sauces. It was a community landmark, a place where fathers worked alongside sons, where generations of Birmingham families earned their living making Britain's favourite condiment. The factory employed hundreds of workers who took genuine pride in what they did. This wasn't some soulless production line churning out generic products. These were craftspeople following a secret recipe that had been locked in a vault since 1903, mixing tamarind and dates and spices in precisely the right proportions to create that distinctive tangy sweetness that made HP sauce unlike anything else on British tables. Local residents grew up with that smell. It became part of the fabric of Birmingham life, as distinctive as the Brummie accent itself. Kids walking to school breathed it in. Shoppers on their way to the market caught whiffs of it. It was everywhere and nobody minded because it smelled like success, like industry doing what it did best. The Aston facility wasn't just producing sauce, it was producing community, identity, belonging. This place embodied the finest traditions of British manufacturing. Making things properly, taking pride in workmanship, valuing quality over quarterly profits. But all of that was about to end, and when it did, it would break hearts across Birmingham and spark outrage across the entire nation. But before we see how Birmingham lost its pride, let's flash back to discover how HP sauce became a British icon in the first place. Frederick Gibson Garton was just an ordinary grocer in Nottingham in the 1880s, running his little shop and trying to make ends meet like thousands of other shopkeepers across the country. But Fred had a hobby that would accidentally create one of the nation's most enduring brands. He loved experimenting with recipes, mixing spices and ingredients in his back room, trying to create something unique that would set his shop apart. After years of tinkering, he finally hit upon something special. A brown sauce with a secret blend of tamarind, dates and spices that created a taste unlike anything else on the market. The sauce was brilliant, tangy but sweet, spicy but not overwhelming, thick but pourable. It complemented everything from sausages to bacon to cold cuts, transforming ordinary meals into something memorable. Fred started selling it in his shop and customers couldn't get enough. Word spread through Nottingham about this incredible brown sauce from Garton's grocer. But here's where the story takes its first tragic turn. Fred wasn't much of a businessman. He was a brilliant recipe creator, but absolutely hopeless with money. His shop ran up debts, and Fred found himself in serious financial trouble. He'd registered the name HP Sauce in 1895, having heard it was being served in a restaurant at the Houses of Parliament. But by 1899, facing bankruptcy and desperate to settle his debts to the Midland Vinegar Company, he made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He sold his sauce recipe to Edwin Sampson Moore for £150, plus the cancellation of his debts. £150 for a recipe that would generate hundreds of millions of pounds over the next century. Fred Garton lived until 1942, dying aged 80, having watched his creation become a national phenomenon while he remained relatively poor and mostly unknown. The man who invented Britain's favourite condiment died in relative obscurity while others made fortunes from his genius. It's the first betrayal in the HP sauce story, but it certainly wouldn't be the last. The recipe Fred sold for buttons would soon gain a connection that would make it a household name across Britain. The HP Foods company bought Fred Garton's recipe and immediately recognised they had something special. But they needed branding, a story, something that would make their sauce stand out on crowded grocery shelves. Then someone at the company heard a rumour, possibly true, possibly complete nonsense, but absolutely perfect for marketing. The sauce was supposedly being served in the restaurant at the Houses of Parliament. Whether or not MPs were actually slathering it on their roast beef is debatable, but the company didn't care. They had their angle. They called it HP sauce, with HP standing for Houses of Parliament, and they put a beautiful illustration of Westminster on every single label. The message was clear. This wasn't just any old brown sauce. This was the sauce of the establishment, the condiment of power, the flavour that Britain's political elite chose for their meals. It was marketing genius, taking a sauce created by a bankrupt grocer and positioning it as the choice of the ruling class. The iconic label became instantly recognisable. That distinctive brown bottle with the gold and cream label featuring Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament became as much a part of British visual culture as red telephone boxes and double-decker buses. The branding was so strong, so perfectly executed, that it barely changed for over a century. By the early 1900s, HP sauce had become the condiment of choice for the working class across Britain. Every cafe had it on every table. Every fish and chip shop had bottles ready. Every household had a bottle in the cupboard. HP sauce wasn't just popular, it was ubiquitous. It was the sauce you put on your bacon sandwich, your sausage roll, your pie and chips, your cold ham. The HP Foods Company expanded production and built the brand into something truly remarkable. They expanded into international markets, riding on British Empire connections to get HP sauce into shops from Australia to Canada to South Africa. Wherever British people went, HP sauce followed. The sauce created by a failed Nottingham grocer had become as British as tea itself. As HP sauce conquered British tables, the company built a factory that would become part of Birmingham's identity. In the early 1900s, the Midland Vinegar Company began producing HP sauce at their factory on Tower Road in Aston, Birmingham. The factory had been established back in 1875 by Edwin Sampson Moore, originally for vinegar production. When Moore bought Fred Garton's recipe in 1899, he transformed this facility into the home of HP sauce production. In 1925, the business was reorganised as HP Sauce Limited, but the factory had already been the heart of sauce production for over 2 decades. This wasn't just another industrial building, it was a statement of British manufacturing excellence. The factory was enormous, equipped with the latest machinery and designed to produce HP sauce on a scale that would satisfy the entire nation's appetite for brown sauce. More importantly, it provided hundreds of secure, well-paying jobs in an area that desperately needed them. The factory became a cornerstone of the local economy. During the 1930s depression, when unemployment devastated British cities, the HP factory kept running, kept employing, kept supporting Birmingham families. During World War II, when bombs fell on Birmingham during the Blitz, the factory kept producing. Workers took shelter during air raids, then went straight back to the production lines when the all clear sounded. Generation after generation of Birmingham families worked at that factory. A father would retire, and his son would take a job there. These weren't just jobs, they were careers, often lasting 30, 40, even 50 years. Workers knew every inch of that factory, took personal pride in every bottle that rolled off the line. The factory became part of Birmingham's identity, as important to the city's character as the Bullring or Cadbury's Bourneville. That distinctive smell of HP sauce cooking became Birmingham's unofficial perfume, drifting across neighbourhoods. For over 100 years, that factory represented everything good about British manufacturing. Quality products, secure employment, community pride, continuity. But empires don't last forever, and the first cracks in HP's foundation were about to appear. In 2005, Heinz, the American food giant famous for their tomato ketchup and baked beans, bought HP sauce from the French company Danone. This already tells you something about how far HP had fallen from its British roots, passed from owner to owner, like a commodity, rather than the national treasure it once was. But Heinz made all the right noises. They promised to keep production in Birmingham. They told workers their jobs were safe. They talked about investing in the brand, expanding distribution, taking HP sauce to new markets. The Birmingham workers and the local community wanted to believe them. These weren't naive people. They'd seen factories close, watched manufacturing jobs disappear to cheaper countries, witnessed the slow death of British industry throughout the 1980s and 1990s. but they hoped that maybe, just maybe, Heinz would recognise the value of keeping HP sauce production in the city where it had been made for over 100 years. Those hopes lasted exactly 1 year. In 2006, just 12 months after buying HP sauce, Heinz announced they were closing the Aston factory and moving production to the Netherlands. The reason? Cost-cutting. The same reason it always is. The same excuse used to justify shipping British jobs overseas, time and time again. Production costs in Holland were lower. Transportation was more efficient. Consolidation made business sense. All the corporate buzzwords that mean absolutely nothing to the 125 workers who were about to lose their jobs. Birmingham erupted in outrage. The closure announcement made national headlines, politicians condemned it, trade unions organised protests, customers threatened boycotts. The sentiment was universal. This was a betrayal, pure and simple. Heinz had lied to the workers, lied to the community, lied to Britain. They'd made promises they never intended to keep, then done exactly what everyone feared the moment it became convenient. The closure of the Aston factory would spark a controversy that went far beyond just job losses. When production moved to the Netherlands in 2007, something strange started happening. Customers who had been buying HP sauce for decades, who could identify its taste blindfolded, who had grown up with it on their breakfast tables, started noticing something was wrong. The sauce didn't taste the same. It looked similar. The bottle was identical, the label unchanged, but the taste was different. That distinctive tangy sweetness, that perfect balance of spices, that familiar flavour that had been exactly consistent for over 100 years had somehow changed. Social media exploded with complaints. Online forums filled with theories. Customers wrote angry letters to Heinz demanding to know what they'd done to the recipe. The company's response was always the same. Nothing had changed. The recipe was exactly identical. Production had simply moved location. Any perceived difference was purely psychological, they claimed. People were imagining things because they were upset about the factory closure. But were they? Sauce fans didn't believe Heinz for a second. They argued that even if the recipe was technically the same, something had changed in the production process. Maybe the water was different in Holland. Maybe the ingredients were sourced from different suppliers. Maybe the cooking temperature or timing had been altered to fit the Dutch factory's equipment. Food scientists will tell you that moving production almost always affects taste, even with identical recipes. Water chemistry varies by location and can significantly impact flavour. Ingredient suppliers change, and even if the ingredients are technically the same, subtle variations in quality affect the final product. Production equipment differs between factories, cooking times and temperatures fluctuate. Mixing processes aren't quite identical. The psychological element mattered too. When you know something's made differently, made somewhere else, made by people who don't have the same connection to the product, it does taste different. The sauce made in Birmingham carried the weight of history, tradition, pride. The sauce made in Holland was just another product on another production line. Something intangible but absolutely real was lost when production left Britain. As customers mourned the lost flavour, they were also mourning something much bigger. HP sauce became a symbol, a shorthand for everything Britain had lost in the age of globalization. "They're making HP sauce in Holland now" became a phrase loaded with bitterness and resignation. It wasn't just about sauce, it was about the death of British manufacturing, the betrayal by international corporations who saw British brands as assets to be stripped and British workers as costs to be cut. It represented the slow erosion of British identity in an increasingly homogenised global economy. The closure of the Aston factory came during a period when Britain was losing iconic brand after iconic brand to foreign ownership and overseas production. Cadbury would soon fall to American craft and move production abroad. Terry's of York had already closed. Rowntree's was long gone to Nestlé. British car manufacturing was a shadow of its former self. Every week seemed to bring news of another factory closure, another brand moving production overseas, another chunk of British industrial heritage disappearing. For middle-aged Britons who'd grown up in the 1960s, 70s and 80s, when Britain still made things, when factory jobs were plentiful, when you could walk into a factory at 16 and have a job for life, the HP sauce betrayal stung especially hard. It was a reminder of everything they'd lost, everything that had been taken from their children and grandchildren. The secure employment, the pride in British products, the sense that Britain made the best things in the world, all of it gone, sacrificed on the altar of corporate profit margins. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. HP sauce, with its Houses of Parliament label, the sauce that had marketed itself as quintessentially British for over a century, was now being made in the European Union by Dutch workers in a Dutch factory. The label showing Westminster and Big Ben suddenly felt like a lie, a hollow marketing trick, a cruel joke. You could buy HP sauce in British supermarkets, but you couldn't honestly call it British anymore. Some people stopped buying it on principle. Others kept buying it despite their misgivings because it was still called HP sauce, because the habit of a lifetime was hard to break, but even those who kept buying it knew something had been lost, something precious and irreplaceable. Today, HP sauce remains on British shelves, but at what cost? Today, if you walk down Tower Road in Aston, you won't smell HP sauce cooking. The factory is gone, demolished and redeveloped into housing and retail units. There's no plaque commemorating over a century of sauce production, no memorial to the hundreds of workers who made Britain's favourite condiment, no recognition that this site was once a vital part of Birmingham's industrial heritage. It's as if that remarkable history never happened. The HP brand itself continues, of course. Heinz still produces it in the Netherlands, still sells millions of bottles every year in British supermarkets. You can still find it on cafe tables, still buy it in corner shops, still keep a bottle in your kitchen cupboard. The label hasn't changed. The Houses of Parliament are still there, still suggesting a connection to British identity that no longer exists in any meaningful way. It's heritage branding at its most cynical, trading on nostalgia and history while the actual product has been gutted of everything that made it British. Heinz will tell you it's the same sauce, that nothing important has changed, that moving production was simply a business decision that doesn't affect quality. They'll point to sales figures showing HP sauce remains popular, that customers keep buying it, that the brand is as strong as ever. And in purely commercial terms, they're right. HP sauce still makes money. Production costs are lower in Holland, profit margins are higher, shareholders are happy. But something was lost that can never be recovered, and older Britons know it. They remember when HP sauce was genuinely made here, when it was produced by local workers in a Birmingham facility, using a recipe perfected over generations. They remember when buying HP sauce meant supporting local jobs, our manufacturing sector, national pride. The story of HP sauce is the story of Britain itself over the past few decades. We created something brilliant, something unique, something the world loved. We built it up over generations, made it part of our national identity. Then we sold it to the highest bidder, watched as it was stripped of everything meaningful, and ended up with a hollow shell that carries the name but lacks the soul. HP sauce still exists, but the sauce made in Birmingham with Birmingham pride, by Birmingham workers who cared about every bottle, is gone forever. If you found this story as infuriating as I did, you'll want to check out my previous video where I explore how Cadbury's, an original British institution, suffered a similar fate. The rise and fall of HP sauce isn't just about brown sauce, it's about what we've lost as a nation, about the slow betrayal of British workers and British communities by corporations that see everything as just another line on a balance sheet. It's about heritage brands becoming meaningless when they're made anywhere but home. It's about the price we pay for globalization and whether cheaper production costs are worth losing our industrial soul.